Hello, welcome to another episode of SoFly. It is April now, and we are back recording another episode. My name is Mitch, and we've got Yilma.
Hello, everyone.
And Aldo is not here with us today because he's in Mexico, actually. He's
He's
on
in
his way to
Ascension Bay.
Mexico right now, to Ascension Bay, back with Kayla and Casey and all those folks. Fuck you, Aldo. But we're super stoked to be chatting with another guest that we have on the show today. Joseph Jackson is a social studies teacher by day and a fly angler, 24/7. If he's not on the water, he's either making plans to get out soon, or he's on his way to the water, or he's writing about it. He's published widely in the fly fishing magazine world, where he and his wife, Emmy, also have their photography featured. He lives in Anchorage, Alaska, but part of his heart will always belong to the piece of Wyoming he grew up in. He was last spotted at a gas station somewhere in the last frontier with a fly rod sticking out the back window. It's Only Fishing, published this year, is his first book. Today he's on SoFly. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, you guys. I've been listening to your show for years, and appreciate the opportunity to be on. So,
wow.
Oh, no way, rad. Okay, great.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you know what you're in for then. You know you're not going to be
sort of,
disappointed.
yeah.
That's good. Right on.
You're in for a factor fishy at the end there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks for coming on, man. We're super stoked to chat just about. Actually, I don't know if we've really talked much about Alaska on the show. Like, we've really only, I think, talked about it with Mark Kurlansky one time about his book Salmon. But
Okay.
other than that, we haven't touched the Alaska fishery, so it's gonna be cool to just get to chat about that. But of course, yeah. Like, firstly, where are you calling in from? You're in Anchorage right now.
I'm in Anchorage, Alaska right now. Yep.
Okay, right on.
Where
What's
there's
the,
still plenty of snow.
Yeah. Okay, I was just
So.
about to ask. Yeah, like, man, it's how long you been out in Anchorage for?
My wife and I moved here 2 years ago. Before that, we were in Fairbanks, which is even farther north. You know, that's like deep
Right.
interior Alaska. So the winters we're used to, but I mean, you don't get used to how much it limits your fishing time. You know, so
Yeah.
But-
So you're no stranger to, like, winter brutal weather or anything.
Oh yeah, having to wait it out till May. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love it. Okay, well, maybe, like, before we get into, like, the book and Alaska and, like, all these really cool topics, we just talk a little bit about, your background, where you kind of came from. You mentioned in your bio there that you're from Wyoming. Is that, like, born and raised in Wyoming, learned to fish there as well?
Yeah. So I was actually born in Colorado, but
Okay.
when I was 7 or 8, my family moved to Wyoming, so I consider that to be where I grew up, and of course, yeah, I was reared with fishing from an early age, not fly fishing specifically. That came along a little later, but I don't know. It's kind of funny when I tell people I'm from Wyoming. They say, "Oh, you must be, familiar with, like, the Gray Reef and Miracle Mile, like all of the, renowned Wyoming
Yeah.
sections and rivers." And I didn't really fly fish very much at all. I didn't really know much about it until I came to Alaska for college in 2014, and then it really kind of took off there. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, been here ever since. So
Wyoming, yeah, I mean, like, Wyoming seems like such a wild place. Like, whereabouts in Wyoming did you grow up? I haven't been there, but it doesn't seem like there's a ton of people in Wyoming.
no, that's one of the reasons I love it, and I'm proud to say I was raised there. But yeah, I was in the southeastern part of the state, so
Okay.
kind of right up against the Nebraska border, geographically, which in terms of fly fishing, I mean, we had some pretty famous water like an hour or two north of us. But I mean, most of the really famous Wyoming fishing was like complete opposite corner of the state. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that might have had something to do with the fact that I fished for, catfish and carp, just, plunking than I did with fly fishing. So
Yeah. So that's kind of how you got into fishing. It was carp and kind
Yeah.
of those types of species.
what was
And,
available. Yeah.
And how'd you get into fly fishing?
So my dad, it was kind of the typical story. He had a couple fly rods and a couple old fly reels, and just
Right.
kind of going through his stuff. I wondered about it because it was so different from the spinning reel, spinning rod that I was familiar with. And he's like, "Well, I'll show you how to do it," and showed me a little how to fly fish. But what he was really into is fly tying. And that caught my attention immediately. That was awesome. And I was learning how to tie all these flies as a kid, and started wanting to put him to use, and asked for a fly rod for Christmas. Was lucky enough to get it, and just kind of went from there. I had these boxes of flies that I'd just been tying without really knowing what they were destined for, and just it happened that way. So
It's cool. I mean, yeah, like, I kind of feel I got into it similar. Like, tying was a big part of when I
Yeah.
got into it. It's weird how that happens, but Tying's so sick too. I don't.
It is.
Do you do it much these days, Ty?
I do. I do. Yeah. My wife and I just bought a house, so I've kind of been. That's kind of tamped down my capacity to fly tie. I don't have a devoted fly tying space just yet, but I'm excited because I know where it's going to be and I know how it's going to be set up. But yeah,
what are you tying? Because I'm assuming you're targeting something soon.
Yeah, I'm tying king flies right now. That's kind of our. That's what I'm looking forward to. I just got I'm pretty new to spay fishing, but I love it to death. That's like my new favorite. I'm head over heels for spay fishing, so I've been tying a bunch of king flies up and hoping they find the mouths of something come June.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
you're in good company. I mean, I mean, I'm not the biggest lover of spay fishing, but I do like it. I like to when I'm in the mood to relax and
sure.
Take it
you might
easy.
be cold. That's the problem.
Yeah. Just
maybe
standing
that's the
there.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I mean, if I lived in BC, I'd probably like it more because the weather patterns change. But in Ontario, the spay fishing is when it gets cold for steelhead.
Okay.
And, yeah. Mitch if Mitch could spay fish for the rest of his life, I think he would. So.
Okay.
Spay fishing's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Kings,
yeah.
Too. Yeah.
Well, fishing for kings too. I don't know. I may have been just lucky the last couple of years because the weather's been awesome, like late May, early June. Sometimes you get dumped on rain, but as far as just having to stand there and cast, like I couldn't ask for better conditions. So
absolutely.
I have yet to land a king on my spay rod. I hooked one after like 3 days of solid effort, and he got off. So
hey, that's a good
yeah.
Just feeling that pull,
It's measured in grabs you get, right? Not fish you land.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Yeah, the grab counts. You fooled the fish. That's great.
Yeah,
that's it.
Okay, so how'd you get to Alaska? You said school? Was it school you did up there?
Well, sort of. It's always kind of a long story, Mitch. But in high school, I went to Washington D.C. for like some youth conference about electric cooperatives. Like how you get power to your house and stuff. Just one of those youth programs, basically. And I went for Wyoming. My wife girlfriend at the time, she went for Alaska. And we met in Washington, D.C. and did the long-distance relationship through high school. And then when it was time to go to college, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, but you're in Alaska, so I'll come to Alaska. What the heck? So
wow, that's crazy.
And it's worked out. We got married in 2018, and thank you. It's been a ride. I'm glad to have ended up in Alaska. It's funny. Wyoming and Alaska, even though they're so different in a lot of ways, they also seem really similar in a lot of ways too. So.
Like what similarities do they share?
I think just like self-sufficiency, the sense of self-sufficiency in its people, because Wyoming's got the lowest population, but Alaska's got the lowest population density. So it's like you learn to rely on yourself and you learn to kind of appreciate the state for what it is and what it has, rather than the cities and, stuff that gets built on it. So that's been cool.
Yeah, I can see that. Makes sense. They're both pretty remote, wild places, like. Is there a sense of that in Anchorage? Like I haven't been, but is it like what is Anchorage like?
It's a city, but I mean, you can drive an hour and hike a little bit, and you can be the only person for miles. Like wilderness and solitude are kind of right out your back door, sort of thing.
I'm looking at the views. It's gorgeous.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. I like Anchorage. I mean, it's still jarring to me to be in a big city because I grew up in a town of 500 people, And my wife, she's even smaller. She grew up in Glen Allen, Alaska, it's pretty out there. It's on the road system, but her graduating class was 6 students. So,
no way. What?
Yeah.
That's awesome. How far from Anchorage is that? Like, is that just
it's like, well, the typical way to show it is, that. And I suppose Anchorage would be like here-ish. And then, so Glen Allen would be kind of like here.
Okay, so just kind of like out in the woods, kind of more remote. I see,
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're both familiar with the rural lifestyle. So getting dropped in, big city Anchorage. They call it Los Anchorage up here in Alaska. And so getting dropped here we're getting used to it, but I don't think we'll ever be totally used to it.
Well, it sounds like it's the kind of place for people like that, right? Who want sort of the chill lifestyle, but then also it's got amenities, so it's like you can do stuff in Anchorage, and later, of course, you can move if you want, you can move even more remote, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and it's nice because it's pretty central too. Like you can access the Kenai Peninsula a couple hours. You know, you can go to interior if you need to, and if you're doing anything fly out wise, like we got the international airport here, so pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Anchorage. I mean, I've been looking at Anchorage a lot lately, just because actually not for fly fishing, but
for this
podcast,
motorcycles.
I've been getting into motorcycles lately.
Oh,
and I've been watching a lot of people do the Anchorage to Prudhoe Bay, like the Dalton Highway thing. And
that's an awesome highway. You should do that. Yeah,
that looks so cool.
I can't believe you're getting a bike, man.
I want to go to Anchorage just to do that. Yeah, I bought a bike yesterday. I'm pretty stoked.
Okay. Well, congrats on that. That's cool.
Welcome
that's
to So
exciting.
Bike. Yeah. Fuck fly fishing. No, that's cool, man. Alaska seems really, really neat. Okay, so like in terms of, well, maybe we'll talk about the book. Why don't we talk about the book?
Sure.
This is your first book that you've published. It just came out this year, right? Like this is fresh off the presses.
Yeah, January 10th. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And maybe like just give us a little bit of background on what the book's about.
Yeah.
For people listening and that kind of stuff.
Sure. So basically in 2020, you know, the whole COVID deal, I'd been writing about fly fishing rather for a while up to that point, you know, just here and there for magazines, and realized I really loved it. And got introduced to the writing of John Gierach, Ted Leeson, you know, those sage guys, and thought, this is awesome. I would love to be able to, you know, try my hand at that. And so I thought, you know, this summer being what it is, I'm going to write an essay for every single fishing trip I go on. And I don't know what's going to come of it. Like I might be able to turn some of them into magazine articles, but I really had no goal beyond that. And so I did that. You know, I fished just like I normally would, but I brought a notebook with me. I took notes and wrote a story. And then by the end of it, I realized, hey, I could make a book out of this that would be similar to, you know, what Gierach writes and Ted Leeson wrote, just in that sort of vein. I'm by no means comparing my quality to those guys, but you know, just
the
same
format,
style.
The style.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I thought I'll send it to a few publishers, and luckily, kind of an Alaska Pacific Northwest publisher, Epicenter Press, picked it up, and I've been having fun with that ever since. So it's basically just a summer of a you know, normal Alaskan fisherman. I didn't take any fly out trips. I'm kind of a dirt bagger. I mean, I was fairly fresh out of college, and I was transitioning careers at the time, so it was all road system based, but. I think a lot of people can identify with that, just because, you know,
for sure,
Alaska's like one of the most expensive places to, you know, do the lodge stays and the flyouts. So there are other ways to do it though. So I feel like the book captures
I mean, like,
that.
You know, doing it by road sounds like really cool, and you get to see parts of the wild in a way that you wouldn't from a plane. You know, like of course a bush plane's awesome, but something about driving like into the woods is pretty intimate. Cool,
it is,
you know.
Yeah, and then I mean through that, obviously, I explore a bit of like the road systems sort of character, you know, what that looks like, and just kind of my own character too. You know, it's like a reflection on my life and a way to cope with that season. I mean, the pandemic thankfully wasn't particularly hard for me. It threw wrenches into our plans, obviously, because I was transitioning from my steady job into a career in teaching, and so that was kind of difficult, but you know, fishing was like the constant thing that I had to sort of stay rooted. So there's a bit of that commentary in there as well.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a great idea. Like, I
pause
love that
for
format.
a second. I just got to plug in I got to plug in my computer.
Please plug it in. Plug away. We'll keep chatting. I love that format. Like, that's great. Like, just and it almost makes like the process of writing a book, because it's your first one, like maybe a little less daunting, or was that not really an issue? You were like, fuck it, I know I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, no, it wasn't an issue. And in fact, I'd written book length stuff before. Just, I mean, you know, like novels that I have tried unsuccessfully to pitch to literary agents and stuff. But, I did it kind of because I love writing, and I love sort of the reflective qualities of it. You know, you can take a video, you can take pictures when you're fishing or doing whatever you love, but for me, I found that nothing captures it. Nothing will ever capture it perfectly, but for me, the written word is kind of the next best thing to, you know, living it. So,
and it's also like such a great way to almost be able to go and have these adventures with bigger purpose. You know, like sometimes it's like like John Gierak, like we had him on the show and he said the same thing. He was like, he said, there's some people that are just so like in love with what they do that they have to come back and like write about it, and like, so he spends like, he spends like 6-8 months of the year fishing, and then he spends those other months writing about that times he was fishing and just reliving those moments, and it's like, yeah, that's like a really rewarding, fulfilling thing,
Totally.
I imagine.
Yeah, that was a big part of it for me, and I found it tough just because I was fishing like constantly that year. I have a line in the book where this whole teleworking thing that everyone got so familiar with. It's really just the perfect excuse to fish on weekdays. And so I was like fishing constantly and trying to have to manage the writing that was going on at the same time. So I'd have like 5 or 6 past fishing trips that I was still writing about, just trying to get in those various headspaces that I was in.
I love that. No, and I mean, and again, like when you make it kind of when it's like I got to fish to write this book, and then that's kind of part of my job. Or we got to go fishing because we do this podcast, and it's like our job. Like we got to fish. It gives it this like greater purpose.
It does,
but it's like writing and podcasts. Like it's similar. Like I know what you're saying about the whole like nice way to kind of capture a fishing trip, because the thing with video and pictures, it's like when you're in it, it's like oftentimes you really have to focus on video and pictures, and it's like you're not really in the moment of the fishing.
Exactly.
Per se, Whereas if you're just writing about it or talking about it after on a podcast or something, you can really be present, and then later you just kind of relive it. So it's like that's what I love about the podcast. I haven't written it, but it sounds kind of. I know what you mean when you say
nail on the head. For sure,
to kind of relive it.
Well, and it's funny. I actually have a background in video production. Like that's what my first big job out of college was managing a couple of video studios, and people would always ask me, why don't you like film your fly fishing trips? And it's like I've tried and it didn't last long. Like I'm just too in love with the fishing and the experience to be worried about a camera.
I feel it, man. I know. Like I think a lot of the time our video stuff has probably suffered for that reason too, because we want to just be fishing. And we want to be in the moment, and so we've tried to find like ways of
or a fishing suffer
formats that or a fishing suffer, because we're like, we got to get this really cool shot, but I don't know. It is tough to, when you see these like really cinematic fishing films, it's like the people shooting are like, they're really just focused on, and the people fishing too, like it's really much more of a production versus like really capturing like a real, so it's hard to like really capture a real moment because it's everything's, you have to stage it because that's just the way shooting stuff works,
Right. Sure.
But writing is such a cool way to capture it.
Yeah, it's all after the fact. You can think about it and process things, and
100%. So so it was like basically like a full year of essays. It was just 2020.
Basically, yeah. I mean, with our fishing season, it was like May to October.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay, so why don't we go kind of through what a fishing season in Alaska looks like? Because like I really have no idea. We haven't really talked about it on the show, so I'm curious.
So right now I'm thinking about steelhead and grayling. Like those are kind of the first. Sick. Well, and some rainbow trout. Those are kind of the first opportunities that pop up. Last week of April, early May, steelhead on a limited basis become available down on the Kenai Peninsula, and then. Of course, like I'm sure you've heard of like the Seatuck River and all those, vaunted Southeast Alaskan rivers. People are flying there now. That fishery is picking up. So there are those opportunities. Coming from Fairbanks, all I really ever had was grayling, which I'll always have a soft spot for those grayling. But they're some of the first arrivals in late April, early May. They're gorgeous fish.
That's cool. You say, and they're running? Like they're running?
Sort of, they have some spawning runs, but they, as they're moving, you can kind of intercept them in the bigger rivers that are ice free.
That's cool.
So that's always been the first opportunity to itch the cabin fever, so to speak. And then rainbows
fish to sort of kick things off though, man. Grayling, like that's such a foreign fish to us. I know a lot of people don't have a shot at catching those, so it's pretty cool. That's a special fish.
Yeah, and they're. I don't want to say I take them for granted, but I probably do just because they're so common. Like they're the bread and butter fish of Alaskans,
Right.
So,
That's cool.
Yeah, but then rainbows, they'll start showing up to, you can kind of get them in a window before they start spawning, and then leave them alone till like second week of June. That can be kind of a tough nut to crack. So, I mean, there's always the potential, though, right? That's really all I'm looking for in the spring once the ice is out, is like the potential, like an excuse to get out there and cast. So
exactly,
yeah. It'll be steelhead, grayling, or trout. I'm not sure exactly which one will be first for me, but
what chapter is the grayling in? Because I love these titles. Red shirt.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When
see,
I
got the
tell
book
my
here,
wife to
Yelma.
blame Jeremy Wade.
That's a good one. Let's see. Good news. That's about grayling. First chapter. Well, yeah. I mean, and you can kind of base it on the season too. Like early in the season, of course, grayling were the target for me. So the first two chapters are about grayling. Yeah. And then I think I just kind of address them like incidentally throughout, the rest of it.
Rest of the chapters are kind of written like, well, each of the chapters obviously written for what you were chasing at that time.
Yeah. But yeah, it is funny that you mentioned that, Yoma, because it's like, yeah, you can look through my book and I can tell you just based on where I was and what I was targeting exactly like the month and oftentimes the day that I was probably doing it,
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but then once those, kind of intermittent fish come and go, then you start getting salmon runs, which is always exciting. You get
Slave to the sockeye.
Slave to the sockeye, yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters. Because sockeyes, I love those fish. They start showing up in some places like early first week of June in some places, and then typically by the third week it's really peaking, and then king's kind of along with them late May, early June. And then if it's a pink year, which is every even numbered year in my part of Alaska, so this year we'll get a break from the big massive armies of pink salmon coming in, but they start coming in, chums start coming in, and then by August, September you have the cohos, the silver salmon coming in, and that's when it gets pretty exciting, and you wish for more hours in the day and more days in September. To catch trout and steelhead and silvers too. So yeah,
that's cool.
That's kind of the Alaskan fishing season in a nutshell. There,
it's exciting.
I dig it. So it's like it really is all cold water species. Like you're not out there fishing for bass or pike or anything like that.
Pike. The red shirt chapter that's about pike.
Okay,
but interior there's a lot more opportunities for pike, so up by Fairbanks, but in Anchorage, in South Central, they're actually considered an invasive species. So they're, the opportunities are there, but you just have to work a little harder for them.
Okay, right on. That's cool. Yeah, so Kings is kind of like the thing you're most excited for right now because you're tying flies for that.
Yeah. And like I said, I just recently got into the Spey game. One of my buddies who is mentioned in chapter 17, Sisyphus and Steelhead. He really got me excited about steelhead and Spey fishing. So hence the Spey route and hence the new obsession for king salmon. So
yeah, I dig it. That's cool, man. So what was like some of the challenges you faced when writing this book? Because I mean, it is obviously like you're going out and you're fishing, and the conditions are going to kind of dictate a little bit of the story. So yeah, what were some of the challenges? Was that ever kind of a thing, the fishing itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say just figuring out how to tell a story that was, I don't know, honest and worthwhile after the fact. Because I mean, I mentioned in the introduction to my book, like this does not include everything that I wrote. I tried to edit it and not include stories that I felt were slop. I tried to cut those things out as you do. But yeah, it was a challenge to just think about how can I make this meaningful not only to myself, but in the event that someone reads this after the fact, how can I make it impactful to them too, so they can take something away from it? And oftentimes I found the answer to that was just being as specific and honest to, my identity as a fly fisher. And I don't quite know what that means, but like I say, I'm kind of a dirt bagger. I do things in my own way. I get up super early and I stay out super late, just trying to avoid other people. But I think a lot of us can identify with that, trying to seek that. So
yeah, totally.
Just striving for that honesty, which is always difficult, and especially after the fact too, like trying to do as much justice to the fishing trip as it was as possible, and here I am looking at it in reflection rather than, you know, living it. Yeah, that was kind of a challenge. And then too, yeah, having plans for things that I maybe wanted to write about or directions I wanted to take a story. And we all know fishing doesn't always play out exactly as you want it to. I mean, if it did, there wouldn't be much point going, right? You might as well just
totally,
yeah,
catching.
Exactly, yeah. And so just having to sort of match what I thought the story was going to be with what the story turned into, and be okay with that. That was kind of a challenge,
right?
But
yeah, because you kind of set out with an idea in mind for a story, right? But then you saying, like, as it kind of went as you went through the year, the writing process, the story sort of changed, became its own thing. You had to just sort of accept that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's kind of like the practice of writing itself. You know, like you sit down and you have an idea of what you want to do, but you kind of have to tell yourself this is never going to be as good as I imagine it is going to be right now. And once you can accept that and get over that, I think you'll be okay. But getting over that hump can be difficult, whether it's writing or having a fishing trip. I feel like the fewest expectations you can go into it with, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. What do you hope people like take away from the book? Like reading the book, what do you want people to feel? What do you want them to sort of think after the fact?
That's a thinker there. That's a stumper for Friday afternoon.
Yeah, Mitch.
I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it could just be pure entertainment, right? Like, hey, I just want people
pure entertainment. I mean,
enjoy the stories,
something to get them through the winter, because I know all too well, looking out in your yard and seeing 3 feet of snow and thinking, oh man, summer's never getting here, you know. And just being able to read a book. I mean, I know the value that I take from, you know, Gearox books is that oftentimes just sheer entertainment, like getting me through the winter. But then, I don't know, I guess kind of the title hints at this too, like It's Only Fishing. Like, don't take this hobby so seriously all the time, you know, like just enjoy it for what it is. Like learn what it has to teach you, and just sort of go with the flow. I mean, I think if I took anything away from the pandemic year and then just fly fishing itself, is just kind of go with the flow, like be flexible, and try and be open to anything, because it'll surprise you how good it can be if you just let it happen, you know?
Yeah, and don't be too protective of, you know, what your ideals are, right? Like, yeah, for sure.
And that was a hard one for me, because I know I have had that before, where I go into something with expectations and they're not met. And, you know, with fishing trips, and I get disappointed and I judge it a failure when, you know, I got out on some pretty amazing streams, and maybe I didn't catch fish, but I got some pretty good consolation prizes with, like, you know, cool birds I saw, or just, you know, getting to breathe clean air, you know, for a change. Like, it's, yeah, it's
cool. It's always an adventure, you know.
It is, yeah.
No matter what, which is always good.
It's never the same. You know, just like every river every year changes. Every fishing trip is, you know, expect the unexpected.
It's a good point, though. Like the pandemic, like COVID itself, like really did kind of do that to everything, you know? Like, I don't know if how you feel about, like, I mean, I don't know, Yilma and I, for sure, we can probably both agree that changed our perspectives about our jobs. And, you know, when you say taking things, like, really seriously, it's like, it did, I think, help a lot of people just put life in perspective a little bit, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think along those lines, like, the book sort of did that for me. Like, life is chaos, just, you know, write it and make the best of it. And that's kind of what this book was. Like I said, I had no idea what it was going to be when I started out, and it wasn't something I could plan. I just had to let happen and be okay with. So it was a good challenge for me. Helped me grow, I think. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, can we talk about a couple, like, standout stories from the book? Like, almost just pull a couple of your favorites out and let's just talk about them.
Yeah. So Yilma, you already mentioned one, Slave to the Sockeye. That's one of my favorites for a lot of reasons. It really hits home for me because I mentioned my wife's family's from the Glen Allen area, and the Copper River drainage, which goes right through there, that gets, in my opinion, the coolest run of sockeye salmon in the entire state of Alaska. And I know, like, people on the Kenai and the Feed Jack in Bristol Bay, they're probably shaking their fists at me right now, but the Copper River, it's got the steepest elevation gradient in terms of like the watershed. Like the salmon, I think that translates to the salmon have to work a lot harder. And you've probably
because they're literally like the river's almost like
yeah
up a mountain.
yeah. It's fairly short. I mean, as rivers go, but the discharge is just incredible for that river, and it's just super impressive to be on it. And to imagine fish like going up this thing every year to spawn just to die at the end of it.
Right.
So I really respect the fish. And being that
they end their life with like crazy feat, you know.
Yeah.
It's like they're like fighting to the end and then they die. It's like, geez, yeah, it is respect. You know?
Yeah, it's admirable, right? But yeah, my wife's family, my in-laws now, they live so close that I can drive like 10 minutes and be fishing the Clutina River, which is one of my favorite tribs of the Copper. And that's what that chapter, Slave to the Sockeye, is about, is just getting up every single morning for a couple weeks to go out there and see if the sockeyes are running, because that's one of those rivers. It's not clear. It's a glacial river. And so you have no idea unless you're there fishing if the salmon are there or not.
Yeah.
Right, because the glacial rivers, like, basically they just look like those blue kind of chalky.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I've seen photos, but I don't know. I've never seen one in person. So you just can't spot fish.
No, not at all. It's like fishing in a protein shake, I think is what I make the comparison to. But the run can just be like a light switch, one day it's on and the next it's not. And if you're not there fishing, you have no idea.
Right.
And so hence getting there, every morning. And it can be a crowded river. And like I mentioned earlier, I kind of try to avoid other people as much as possible. So I'd be getting up 1, 2 a.m. and fishing there every day, which after a while kind of turns into a zombie. But just that experience, I feel like, was so, I don't know. I was like treating it like a job, I had to get up and I had to do this.
Yeah.
And, it was challenging and drew a lot of, I don't know, I feel like profound thoughts out of me. Which reading back, I don't think any of them were dishonest or like pretentious or anything. I think they all stood up to, going back and rereading. But
I mean, there's something about that process of like working really hard for fish like that does make you like quite reflective and, you're coming up with all kinds of stuff.
Totally.
Like when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And lots of time to think, because I don't fly fish for sockeyes. That's kind of my exception, but just because you're using so much weight to get down to bottom.
Right.
So I'm actually using a spinning rod, but anyway, it's basically just making drift after drift after drift, and gives you a lot of time to think. And I happened to meet a pretty interesting guy when I was getting up early on those mornings. He would actually get up earlier than I did, and I'd pull up to the bridge and I'd see his little car there every day before me, and it kind of became, we were like strangers but friends at the same time, We'd like run into each other, see how we did, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you'd actually chat and stuff like that.
We'd have little small talks, and it just kind of developed over those couple of weeks. And finally, like I learned his name, he learned mine. The line in the book is like, if there was ever a handshake to break pandemic protocol for, it was that one.
Right. Yeah.
So I shook hands, just talked a lot, and then I kind of broke my streak of getting there every morning, because I actually went dip netting in the Copper River to get more sun.
Yeah, what's dip netting?
Yeah, so it's kind of an Alaska. I think it's allowed in parts of British Columbia too. Actually, I'm not sure, but
okay.
It's like it's literally, you have a giant net. I think it's typically like 4 foot wide net on like a 14-foot handle, and you're literally sticking the net in the water and netting salmon.
Oh wow!
Whoa.
Yeah, and there's some limited fisheries for it. The Copper River, the Kasilof, and the Kenai. There might be some others, but those are kind of the 3 main rivers that you can put in for a personal use dip net permit for.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Copper's kind of the ultimate, just because it's such a big river. It's actually pretty dangerous. A couple people usually drown every year doing that. Yeah, so it's pretty intense. But I was going with a friend of mine that weekend, and it kind of broke my streak of getting up early to actually fish with rod and reel for these sockeyes, And my fear was, the whole day I was dip netting, my fear was, I'm going to show up tomorrow, and John, the fisherman I met, his vehicle is not going to be there, you know.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I went back the next morning, and he was gone. And my last line of the chapter is, it was the first time in my life I was disappointed that someone didn't beat me to the river, you know.
That's nice.
Just because we'd
nice.
established that sort of friendship, you know, just being on the river.
I like that.
And yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. Like one you couldn't, if you were writing a novel, I don't think you could think of a cooler scenario than that.
Yeah.
So it was pretty neat.
That's awesome. Has he read that chapter?
I don't know if he has. I haven't been able to track him down. I never got a last name. I just knew him by John, and he knew me by Joe. So, John, if you're out there, I've got a book for you.
Yeah.
He's in a book.
Yeah.
Hopefully, maybe he's listening. Hey, if he's listening.
Yeah. I called
Back
him
to that spot with the book and see if he's
Yeah. I called him the Samurai before I knew his name, because his vehicle was a Suzuki Samurai.
Nice.
So
Nice.
he had an alter ego until I knew his name.
The Salmon Samurai.
That's right. Yeah. He was a pretty good fisherman. He'd usually come out with his limit. So
Yeah. Oh wow.
yeah.
Dip netting, Mitch. That's a new one. Dip netting.
Dip
Yeah,
netting.
and I've never
Well,
heard
yeah.
of it before. It's
The
wild.
following chapter, if you want to learn more about dip netting, chapter 8 is all about dip netting. So
Okay.
Cool.
yeah, that
So
was
just net and fish out of rivers.
net and fish out of rivers. Yeah.
So when we
Most
see it on
people-
Google and we're like, "What the hell are these guys doing?" It's actually
Yeah.
a permit though, and it's actually regulated. So
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you have to. You can get, I think, 20, or these regulations might have changed since I did it, but you can get 20 for every member of your household. So I could get, I think, 40 for my wife and I.
jeez.
I ended up getting, between three of us, we got 60 fish, I think, in the course of a day.
Wow.
And you have to be very careful about clipping their tail fins a certain way, so you can, identify them as being dip net caught and not sport caught. And so that's how, Fish and Game tells. But it's a limited window too. You can't do it all summer. It's like a couple of weeks that it's open for. And they'll, based on run sizes they're seeing, they'll close it down by emergency order, sooner than planned if needed. So yeah, pretty interesting little Alaskan quirk there.
Yeah.
Well, it's a cool story in general. Like, I mean, I love the idea of the, just those like kind of friendships you have with people on the river that, you're there at the same time and slowly get to know each other if you see each other more and more. I mean, I feel like that's, it is like a weird sort of just little, it is a weird encounter with a person because like you're both like in a really good mood. You don't know each other. You're doing the same thing. So you have this really, specific shared interest.
Right.
It's happened to me, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Where you see the same person day after day, and then you're sharing flies, and you're you're giving each other pool. You can take that pool, I'll take this pool.
Yeah,
it's funny. You become buddies, and then you just never, and then you don't see each other for like 9 months.
It's like
exactly.
Next season. Yeah,
it's like a classic, iconic fish story, and a little bit of a aside. Not really. It's on the same topic. I remember a Family Guy episode, and I gotta just say this. I know Mitch probably watched it, but there was an episode where you know how they do the cutaways. So Peter's on a boat, and he has a fishing buddy that he just meets on the lake, and they fish in the boat. They say nothing the entire time, and they do this over and over again, year after year, and then and he's the only one at the funeral when the other guy passes. But it's like this genuine moment of like two buddies who don't know anything about each other, but they come together through fishing. It's hilarious.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
that's
good
cool.
ref.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, I don't know. I feel like a curmudgeon before my time, especially when I'm fishing, because my eyes narrow and I grit my teeth whenever I see other people. It's like you're the last thing I want to see when I'm out fly fishing. But this guy and others too that I haven't mentioned in the book or really anywhere, but they slowly whittle away at that sort of rock shell that I tend to put up, and I have yet to meet who I feel is a bad person on it, fly fishing. Totally. So
yeah, same here.
No, I feel you. I feel you. Okay, and you mentioned you had another cool story.
Yeah. So let's see.
I mean, the book's full of good stories, but these are
I like to think it is, right?
Yeah.
But chapter 10, when I die, tell my wife to blame Jeremy Wade. I feel like that's a pretty good one. Because of course, River Monsters
Wade.
and
Yeah.
Jeremy Wade. I loved that show growing up, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what I attribute my obsessiveness with fishing to, is just watching this guy do literally anything for the sake of a fish. Like it put it on the order of like being a higher calling or something to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, people have careers that they don't give this much effort to, like stuff they've worked their whole lives for that they don't care about as much as this guy cares about fish.
Yeah.
And so that's really what started my obsession, I feel like. And in the story, I seek out what I and biologists think is the northernmost population of rainbow trout. Certainly in the continent, maybe in the world. I mean, there might be some rainbows in Kamchatka that are slightly farther north, but we'll just say it's northernmost in the world.
Yeah.
And anyway, you can either get there by floating, by doing a 5 or 6 day float trip and floating down the river that these rainbows are in, or you can you have a few options to hike in. One of them is like a 4-wheeler trail that tends to get, hammered a little more, but then the other one, it's only a winter trail, or it's only recommended for winter use because it's basically a swamp, like 6
Right.
miles of hiking through swamp.
Jeez.
And I thought, well, I'm less likely to encounter other people, and this is going to get me where I need to go. So this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I did the 6 mile each way hike through swamp, and it was as bad as you would imagine it was. It was like hip deep in muskeg for most of the way, and I just brought a pair of shoes that I was planning on trashing anyway.
Yeah.
But bringing all your gear in with you, and mosquitoes, just awful mosquitoes. And
Oh, yeah.
and 2020 was a particularly bad skeeter year as it was, but they were just, it was to the point where you can see how someone could die by mosquito out here if you're not prepared.
I believe it.
I believe that.
Yeah, and prior to that, I was kind of thinking about my idea, and I'm like, am I stupid for doing this? Like, is this just going to be a big waste of my time? Is this going to, be a failure?
Yeah.
And then I just thought, what would Jeremy Wade do? And it's like, he'd go, so I'm going.
Go, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like that.
Adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's been in a plane crash. He's been arrested as like a spy. He's gotten malaria, almost died from malaria. Like
It's a
the
maniac.
stuff. He's a
Yeah.
maniac. The
Yeah.
stuff I have to contend with is
Yeah.
paltry compared to that. So,
But you said less people, but are there grizzlies in that area?
oh yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I mean, that's,
Mitch.
being hip deep in muskeg and a grizzly comes around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the
Pretty
other.
freaky.
That was the other thing was bears. So yeah, I didn't have a firearm at the time or a pistol at the time, and so I borrowed my father-in-law's .45, and I had that with bear spray. It made me a little more confident going in, but still, it's like it doesn't matter if you have bear spray or even like a bazooka, because in that kind of territory, like you're not gonna have time to get it out anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So it might have been stupid, but it was worth it. Like I found the trout I went there for and had a pretty awesome experience with them.
That's cool.
Because it's in a series of pretty intense rapids. In fact, all the rafters, they have to portage around that spot when they do that float trip. But the sockeye smolt, the baby sockeyes, like they're making their out migration at that point, and I just managed to time it right to where the trout were just feeding voraciously on all these sockeye smolt, and like within the whitewater. So you're like fly casting to just the little pillows behind these gigantic boulders, and your fly's in there for maybe a second before it's whipped out. So it was super challenging fishing, but it was rewarding. I caught some beautiful rainbows. So
That sounds worth it to me. Like, sure,
Yeah.
you might get eaten by a bear, but that's the adventure. And you know what?
exactly.
You gotta go. You gotta go. You have to go.
Yeah. So that one, that was one of those ones where I was glad I did it, and I was glad that it turned out totally different than I expected it to,
That's awesome. I love it.
So, yeah.
Oh, man.
Sick, man. Well, you know what? Like I said,
Something
we haven't
about
read the book yet, and sorry, because like usually we like to read before people on, so we can talk about the stories. But it's been cool, like getting to just kind of hear it from like, almost a naive, blank perspective. And
I'm giving you all the spoilers.
Well, I'm gonna go read it now, and
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna know kind of a bit more context of your favorite stories and whatnot. But
Yeah.
it sounds like a really cool book, and I mean it's a great idea. I love the thought and the idea, and So I mean,
It's a great idea. Yeah.
thanks for chatting about it. But now we've got Mitchie's Fishes 5.
Whoa, already?
Which
Okay.
is
It's been an hour
yeah.
already. Oh my god.
I know it's already been 45 minutes. But these are 5 questions we ask every guest at the end of the show. Same 5 questions we ask every guest. So we're gonna ask you them now.
Okay.
And we're going to start with, what is your favorite fish and why? If you had to pick a favorite fish, what would it be?
Yeah, geez, that's a tough one. I feel like it should be easy, but it's not. I'm just going to say grayling. I mean, that's, like I said, they're
Awesome.
kind of the bread and butter. They're kind of what I go to when I'm feeling down about other fish. Like when I spend 3 days fishing basically nonstop for king salmon and I hook one fish and only to lose it, like grayling
Yep.
are what I go to pick me back up.
I love it.
And yeah, in my opinion, there's really not a better summer day spent than one spent on a grayling stream. Like just being able to get in the water with like a pair of hip boots and
Yeah.
dry fly fish for grayling. Just go to your heart's content, you know.
Because they're easy, right? Like they're pretty forgiving and pretty willing.
For the
and eager.
most part, they cough up their old challenging, wily fish just often enough to make it interesting, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Where they need the perfect cast, the perfect fly, the perfect mend, the perfect
Yeah.
drift. Like they need all that, and then you can go and catch like 20 fish that are pretty obliging after that. So.
See, I like
There's
that.
numbers.
Yeah, I like that you have to be cautious of or conscious of your presentation. Like that just
Yeah.
makes it that much more challenging and worth it. To
It
me
does.
sometimes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Dry fly. Oh my god, it's like
Yeah,
the
it's
best.
great.
Some of that. I mean, we spay fishing for sure, but dry fly fishing is like so fun. You know, like it's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
hard to beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those kinds of nights, you know, like on the river, nice weather, and you just
Perfect
have fish that
drift.
dry. It's like
It's not dragging. It's just
grayling are cool, man.
Yeah.
They're so beautiful. Like I know Yilma's been talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
wanting to get one for years, and I feel the same way. Like they're so cool looking. You know,
Yeah.
so I get it.
They're
I
cool
get it.
fish. Well, if you ever get the idea to come catch some, let me know. I can show you
Think
some pretty
we-
awesome grayling spots. So
I think we definitely need to do that.
Yeah.
Alaska's just one of those places. Like it's like I feel like everybody that's into the outdoors in some capacity is like, well, I got to go to Alaska one day.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah,
it's
kinda
it's
that
coming.
way.
It's coming for sure.
100%.
Okay. Number 2 is if you could fish anywhere in the world right now, assuming it's going to be the best fishing ever, best season, best time to go. Where
Yeah.
would you go and why?
I would probably go to the Rio Grande on Tierra del Fuego right now.
Nice.
I still love it, man.
Just
Good answer.
yeah, and I mean it's perfect timing too, right? Because I mean that's happening right now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's a hell of a bucket list trip, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that would be so cool.
yeah. One of my buddies mentioned in chapter 17 of the book, he's done that. And that's the pictures he showed me are pretty amazing. Actually, that's kind of how I met him. He was on a podcast that I was helping produce, and
Yeah,
he sent some pictures in his email. Like, just got back from Argentina. It's like only a hardcore dedicated fly angler would know to go there. So I want to know you. You know?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool, man. It's a good way to meet somebody. Okay, I love it. Number 3 is, what is one of your best or favorite fishing memories of all time?
Probably a trip I took with one of my best friends, Ryan, this past May. We went down to. It was an assignment for Fly Fisherman magazine, actually, one of my first big magazine assignments, which was pretty cool in itself, like a goal I'd been shooting for a while. But it was down there on the Seatuck River in southeast Alaska for steelhead, and he's probably the most hardcore fly angler I've ever met, which is kind of why I hang out with him, because he like challenges me every time we fish together.
Yeah.
But we went down there for a week, and it was hard fishing at first. I mean, steelhead, like they're obliging some days and
Oh, yeah.
totally ignoring you the next. And it was exactly like that. I mean, but it was like, it built like a perfect story. The quality of the fishing built every single day until the last day, and it was like bluebird skies, and I caught the biggest steelhead, almost biggest fish in my life that day. It was just perfect. Like, yeah.
Oh, man.
The challenge, then surmounting the challenge, and having having like that climactic moment. I couldn't have written it better, you know.
Yeah, it's like a perfect story to live.
Yeah. And then my buddy Ryan, he got a pretty amazing fish a couple hours afterwards. So
that's a good day.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Damn.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, number 4, Mitch's Fishies 5, is why do you fly fish? Why do you bother doing it at all?
Yeah. I mean, because I love fish, obviously, and I love the environments that they live in, but I think the draw with fly fishing is that it's imposing even more challenges on yourself than you would otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same reason I like bird hunting, you know, like wing shooting. You're not just shooting something on the ground. You're
Right.
taking that extra challenge to attain the thing. And I like that about fly fishing. And I also like that there are just so many layers to it. You know, if you want to be the hardcore spay angler that knows, you know, the grain size of all the different heads you can put on your spay line, like you can do that. But if you want to be the guy that just picks up a fly rod at Bass Pro and goes out there and, you know, catches stock trout on dry flies, like you can do that too. Like it's really limitless in how far you want to take it and how obsessed you want to get with it. So
Totally. No, it is like there's so many. Not to say, I mean, you know, like spin fishing. I don't do enough spin fishing. I mean, I fish with a couple spin anglers once in a while, and they're like pretty dialed. But you know, it's it's much more. You got your rod and your line and your lure, you know, and it's kind of like it's basically it, you know, like
unless you're Shane.
Depends. I mean, if you're doing surf fishing or if you're you're getting really specific, but something about fly, like you're right, there's so many, and then depending on the species, it changes completely, you know, or like the water body, you know, so it's true. It is a cool, layered thing. I like that.
Even more layered if you're spay fishing.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what I was just gonna say. I think it makes you more in tune with like the water you're fishing too. Like you have to be more aware of. You have to be far more aware of like what the current's doing and what the underwater topography, I feel like, looks like if you're gonna have a good presentation. And I really 100%. Like getting in tune with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of the time too. Well, maybe some people can, but I can't cast as far as I can spin cast, you know. So it's like you gotta really know the lake or the river or whatever, so you can, you know, actually have any shot at catching fish. So
no kidding.
Fly fishing's it's cool in that way. Okay, number 5, Mitch's Fishes 5.
The favorite
is what fly pattern represents you best and why? If you were a fly.
If I was a fly, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. This one stumps a lot of people. We've had a lot of woolly buggers. What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Can I make it one of my own flies?
Oh, so you can do whatever you want.
What is this fly?
Okay. So the fly's called the Def Leopard, and it's actually my go-to king fly, which I'm concerning myself with now, is tying these Def Leopards. The reason I compare myself to them is that they're so unnecessarily complicated. It takes me like an hour and a half to tie each one.
Yeah.
But when it gets done, I just love it. Like even if I don't catch any fish on it, I just love casting that thing, and I love the idea that it's down there, and if something wants to grab it, they can.
Yeah. Cool.
That being said, it has proven pretty effective so far.
That's cool. So it's like your own pattern.
Yeah, it's based a lot off of like Jeff Hickman's Fish Taco, and then what else did I base it off of? There's a local fly tyer here in Anchorage.
Yeah.
He ties something called the Avenger. It's kind of based off of that, with it's mostly like Flashabou and ostrich kind of in the back, articulated hook, and then it's got various layers of like schlappen and chenille as props, you know, and then it's got a rabbit hair collar.
Okay.
With some jungle cock and some squirrel mixed in there as well. But
wow, what a fly! Yeah, very Def Leopard. Very Def Leopard.
Very rock and
hair
roll.
metal. Yeah.
Make it as colorful as you want. Yeah,
I love it. Well, you got to send us a picture of one of these because we should post it on Instagram because that sounds pretty cool.
I'll do that. I'll send you a picture of the latest and greatest Def Leopard.
I like that, Def Leopard. Cool. I dig it, man. That's cool. Joseph, man, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the book and Alaska and your fishing life and, you know, everything else. I'm sure we could talk for hours about just all the different aspects of fishing out in Alaska and what you're up to. But what do you got coming up, next? What are you looking forward to? I mean, I know your time flies for Kings and stuff like that, but yeah.
I'm actually working on my next book. Almost got that done. That I have no idea how far out that one's going to be in terms of getting published, but hoping for 2024. It might be early 2025, but it's in a similar vein. I mean, it kind of follows stories throughout my life that are centered around just getting up early to be in the outdoors.
Yeah.
So there's like some bird hunting in there. It's mostly fly fishing though, of course. So excited to finish that up. Then spay fishing for Kings, and then I don't know. I trying to keep the summers open ended, especially after writing this book, just letting things happen. So
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Where can people find this book? And kind of a little shameless plug time. How can people find you, what you're doing, all that stuff?
Love shameless plug time. Yeah, so you can get the book. It's Only Fishing on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, virtually anywhere you want to online. Otherwise, my website is, and I'll send this to you guys too, obviously, but JosephDJacksonWriter.com. Right. And then my Instagram handle, which is the only thing I really do, the Instagram handle is saveaworm_fishafly.
Nice. Right on.
Great.
There you go. That's another book title right there.
Yeah, that's a book title.
Exactly, yeah. Save those worms.
Save those worms, man. Those poor worms. They've suffered for too long.
They have.
I love it, man. Well, we'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes too, and so you can find it. But thanks again for coming on, Joseph. It was really great to chat, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, same guys. Like I said, I've been an avid listener and appreciate being able to be on. It was fun chatting with you guys.
Likewise.
Awesome. Sweet. Thanks, man.
Cool.